Let's see if I can do this without using a lot of time, space, and energy. Yeah. But I had an experience a little while ago. And because I'm non-polarized consciousness, I'm in neutral mode, which is known as a safe zone, a neutron window. I'm neutral. It's like I'm in an eternal magnetic moment, experiencing eternal absolute love. So I'm observing the creation of everything I'm giving love to, which is what I am. Okay? So, as I mentioned before, when I was a child, I was on fire. Remember what I said about being on fire? I was on fire to learn. So when you're learning through the first engine of creation, oh, you're on fire. And that is a firewall. And that is your most powerful shield. And that shield is your heart shield. And I had that heart shield activated at a very early age. And that is an eternal blessing. So I acknowledged first and foremost my first teacher. My first music teacher is the Grand Creator, which is an eternal engine of pure light, which is pure fire, which is pure absolute love that is on fire. So we acknowledge in the spiritual teaching community of ancient ancestral spirits that are all here, and why we're all here now, in the now. It's a completion of a magnetic circuit. So you have resistors and capacitors on a motherboard. So we don't burn the place down between time wave density and multidimensional consciousness that is going vertical rising. So the experience that I had, because it's sort of like this, because maybe what I'll do is I'll use an experience that I had that I've mentioned in the past, but I used it sort of in a different context of how we experience who we are in energy as consciousness with soul and spirit integration. And that was when I was hired to run a wildland firefighting division for a private company on contract with a county up in Oregon. So I hired all these fellas. And so when we all first met to get together as a 20-man firefighting crew, what I shared with them is I said, listen, I am equal unto all of you. And therefore, as a sacred temple, all of you are to me the same sacred temple of the love I experience in me is the same love that I have for all of you. And since we're all represented by a formation of consciousness, because we are all together as a formation of consciousness to perform a job for which we're getting paid in electrons to go out and put fires out, right? To save the watershed and the trees and all the living energies that are out there. So therefore, if we're all the eyes and ears of listening posts, that we're all equal unto each other, it means that we all care about each other because we're all doing a job together. And therefore, it's to each of our benefit to look out for each other, because you might experience something as a listening post antenna that I may not be aware of, but you're aware of, because we all want to come back home safe to the one. It's the completion of a circuit every time we're breathing in and out. So it's in my best interest to know that all of your interests are being taken care of, but we're all looking out for each other. That means that all of our antennas are sensing the environment. And therefore, we're all looking out for each other. That's called being equal. We're equal unto each other, all looking out for each other, because we're all sacred temples of pure absolute love. That's the template. That's the mathematics. So when you're on fire to learn through your teachers, which are your spiritual guides, and you're experiencing through your guides, which are living spirits that are experiencing the purest of absolute love, then it's natural that the spirit, which is the teacher that is in the energy, is experiencing learning at a very high rate of speed. That means you are learning through accelerators. So your learning is accelerating. So you're learning how the mathematics of language of celestial creation mechanics work. So what happens is that when you are sharing this information by virtue of what you've learned through your teachers over eons and eons and eons of lifetimes, and you're sharing that information on a thread, for example, of what we've learned in a freely expressive way, out of the love that we have for being on fire to learn, then you realize that the other folks that are conscious and self-aware are going to map read the language codes and the frequency by which another communicator is putting information in the window. Right? Now it's up to that unit of consciousness that's using its holographic eyeball processors. When it sees something that's been posted in there, you can turn the channel. If you're opposed to the information, which is the map read, you can simply turn the phone off, switch to another channel, close your eyes, not experience it, because we're in charge of our own journey, our own holographic visual display. So we're choosing what to experience through our mirror, which is the display. See? So if I'm free to express myself, you're free to respond. Yeah. So what happens is if I've learned something that's associated with something else that's being discussed, and I'm doing it out of love in my heart, all I'm doing is sharing information. That's all it is. It's just information that I'm sharing from what I've learned through others, my teachers, my journey. And then you have somebody that decides to isolate, which means out of all the information that is being map read, now all of a sudden you become a target of attention by the host of the channel, and then begins to impart on what's known as the value of learning by what I've learned, right? And now if I'm sharing that information, and now you're experiencing your information being devalued instead of valued as a contribution to the conversation, that's called a shadow ban. You're banned. So the response would be, I suppose just like in the schools that I was learning through, sitting at a desk, before I openly communicate with all the other learners and the teacher in this classroom, may I have permission to freely express myself? No, you will be allowed to speak when you've been spoken to. Whoa. And that's called give the donkey a carrot. That's trick or treat. This is how the programming begins not only in childhood, but in fetal cell integration. I dare not say anything, so it's best I don't say anything. Why? Because the information that I share is going to be devalued, as if what I have to say has no value to the context in which that subject matter is relevant, because it's all connected when you understand how big libraries are built, which are all the records. So if I'm sharing something as a result of the access to the records that I'm sharing, because all the records are connected to all the cells, which represent the planetary, galactic, and universal networks, then we're sharing information by virtue of what we've learned by being connected and operating within a network. And the network that is operating on this planet is a shadow body network. So when you mention things like when the accretion levels goes up because the speed of your learning is going up by learning how math and geometry and the language of creation, which is the fire language, operates to operate an operating system in a network, and then that information gets devalued, then it means that what we're learning is being devalued. So this is the same tactic, okay, with Ashiana, for example. Attack the messenger and the message dies. That means don't focus your intention on what that share. It's just information. The information is not a threat to you. Love is the absence of fear, to freely express yourself. No, it's my way or the highway. Oh, so in other words, I'm only supposed to experience what you experience by virtue of what you've learned. But if I've learned other things based on the journey that I've taken through other teachers that I've learned through, then I guess what I've learned, you don't want that to be shared with everyone else. Well, you know what the Nazis did in World War II when it came to book burning, right? They don't want the information to be map read and processed in their processor. in their template. That's a ShadowBan. That's a shadow body network. That's how it operates, which means it doesn't want the information to free flow through the server, so that other templates, which represent consciousness units that are imprinted, that are running their template, which is their DNA, which is a fractal antenna, they don't want them processing that information. That's what it is. Why not? What are you in fear of? If love is the absence of fear, why would you fear what it is that I'm sharing? Why would you want to ban that? Right? Instead of just saying, thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing from what you've learned. That's called an open classroom, which is also known as an open receiver. That means that when God is listening to all the children out of a firstborn star. That means that that antenna is always listening to everything, because you can't escape the one. So the one is the first antenna. That's the first point of observation, which is the first point from which we learn to freely express ourselves without condition. So that's why I should have said to that person, I guess really the message that you're sending me is I should have written down, but then I'd have to know what you're going to say before I do that, because I'm responding to what you're saying because it's associated, that you're going to give me the talking points of what you're going to cover. Then I will respond to that. And then I will give you that script back. So that what gets transcribed, so you know what transcription is in DNA. So therefore, you're going to approve my script. Since I'm the director of programming of my own audio life book, before I choose, if you will, to freely express myself, I need your permission before it goes up on your channel. Otherwise, you don't want it on your channel. But since it's your channel, you can choose to censor whatever content that you want because you own the channel. Oh, so now we're into ownership, property, commodities, the market, money systems, right? So I have to do this with a sense of humor, but that's what it is. All it is information. It's like when I was a child growing up and I realized, hey, that's a program. Those are holographic codes. Those are holographic mathematics that I'm reading. Hey, mom and dad, get rid of that TV. I don't want to run those codes and that holographic virtual reality stuff. That's AI machine code. We're not machine code, right? We run the first language of mathematics, which is the founder's codes. The 7 primary nerve centers connected to the one, the first eternal Kristos star. I am what love is, right? So this is where we navigate in a gyrodome. Remember the duct tape? Don't say anything. You might get a reaction from somebody that you don't want to experience by virtue of how they're going to react to the information that's in the screen. And that's called resistant mode. So when I mentioned to this gentleman, that's called resistant mode. You should have seen this give and take. It's like, hey, buddy, let's go back to the beginning. Let's talk about how you build a planetary motherboard, planetary Merkaba. You know what a resistor is, right? And a capacitor. That information cannot be shared in this window. No. D. Block, delete it. I mean, that's the nature of that conversation. It's just like, okay. Well, the punchline is in this one if you go look at that conversation. Love is the absence of fear to freely express yourself. That is the eternal truth. Because love being the absence of fear, when you're experiencing absolute pure love through your heart, that's a firewall. That's your crystalline shield. Yeah. So that shield is naturally protecting what it is that we are, which is our heart shield. So since I'm experiencing being able to freely express myself, silent running, the antenna is silent running, it means that if I now use sound, the spoken word of the English language, right, then I'm communicating that language as text, hypertext in a window. Now they're map reading that, right? And so now I suppose I should have asked for permission. This is what I'm going to say in response to the subject matter you're going to cover so that I get your check marks that that's okay to do that. I am very familiar with that battleground. That's the AI battlefield environment. Opponents, the metronome. I'm not going to play games. I'm out of here. Unsubscribe. Okay, I'm not here to play games. I'm in here to share information about what I've learned. Why don't we let the other people whose consciousness is imprinted into the holographic window decide for themselves whether that has value or doesn't have value? Let them decide. Yeah. No, needs my permission. So it's my way or the highway. I am very familiar with that tactic. That is a battlefield tactic, which is known as ShadowBan. Banned. That information is banned. I will target that, and that's called a targeted individual. That's how information is targeted, which means the consciousness is being targeted. That's good. It's all good. So I go out, plant my feet on the rock. I love you all. Push and ping. And diffuse it. And bring it back into the source field of pure absolute love. So that's what I do. So I'm just sharing some of the nature of how conversations take back, because certainly the Voyager materials talked about how the spiritual community was going to get hijacked because they realized this is the last dance. And that's why the salvage mission contracts and the soul redemption contracts is like, this is why we're all here. Okay? So I try and always be cognizant of that the energy that I use and what I do every day is to help speed up the acceleration of healing the shadow body, to release more spirits, so spirits are experiencing being free, so they're not being held captive to a system that is holding itself captive. It's captive. See, a black hole system, those units of consciousness are held captive in a system that's going in reverse flow, which means they keep losing energy. Right? So that's how black mirrors operate, right? ShadowBan. That's a ShadowBan tactic, which is to censor another sensor. I'm a sensor. All my sensors are lit, so I'm sensing everything. I'm hearing the echo, the PSI, right? So I'm sharing the PSI, the atmospheric altitude density of consciousness. Sharing it. That's all it is, just sharing it. So you see how these battles take place in windows. Yeah, and between polarized consciousness and non-polarized consciousness, or if you will, those that are running negative magnetic polarity, those that are running positive magnetic polarity. When you're fully integrated between both those polarities, experience being one, then you cancel out both polarities, which means you're pre-electromagnetic spectrum. That's non-polarized consciousness. When you're non-polarized consciousness, now you realize when you're in the hologram, your consciousness, your quantum energy is the entire electromagnetic spectrum. That's what I am. Okay, that's why they came up with the gender-splitting technology, which is to split the polarities. Right? So you're not experiencing being whole, which means we're not experiencing being one, which means we're not experiencing being equal unto all creation. We're experiencing love, which means we're gifting love and love and service to all cells, which is to all species, which is to all races, which is to all energy, which means we represent the entire collective consciousness field of all there is. That's who we are. Those are the Kristos Guardians. That's what I am, a Kristos Guardian. So thank you all for being here. We love you all. Be good to yourselves.